If it's making you really think about your culture, that's the aim of the exercise. Anybody got any comments they want to make about it? You're allowed to say it's complete crap. I've got no problems with that. No, you're all being very polite to me, okay? I'm leaving the country tomorrow, so you can give me a hard time. But I'm coming back in 2 months. So watch out. Okay, so that's a good one to use, and you want to do it in groups. So you get one of the aims of these tools is get the group discussion going. So that's if it does that, it's really serving its purpose. Okay, there's another tool here which we're not going to look at in detail. It looks through culture, through those 8 elements there: communications, relationships, power, flexibility, fairness, trust, truth, and empowerment. So, yeah, so there's a series of questions around that which help you understand where the problems lie. And again, it gets those discussions going when people have different answers and different views. This is one we're going to have a go at. This is looking at desirability of behaviours. One of my associates used this in Fiji recently to develop key result areas for staff, the senior staff of an organisation in Fiji who will remain nameless. Okay, so it's a quadrant. You have a situation which is going to be the current situation, and that can be the new or the ideal. And then this axis you have desirability. These are the behaviours you don't want, and these are the behaviours you want. In other words, they're undesirable, desirable. So you look at your current situation and you list all the behaviours you tolerate in your organisation that you really don't like, but you tolerate. Also, then the ones you really cherish in the current situation. Then you look at then you start in the new situation. These are the ones you want, in other words, you'd crave for, what you'd like to have in the organisation, the good organisation. But then also there are a few you might fear that might come as a result of the changes. And the next one is some examples of it. So I suggest your notebooks there, draw that quadrant, start looking at your own organisation and start putting the behaviours of your organisation, because behaviours are a reflection of culture. And you've got more chance of changing people's behaviours than you have of values, and etc. But again, behaviours are reflections of things. So draw that quadrant, and there's some examples there which you might find useful. Have a look at your organisation using those quadrants. The 60 tools in the book, which have been selected over the years as the most useful ones. I've got a CD here which has got 250 tools on. So that's a complete shooting match. Then I'm giving you just about 10 minutes just trying to get you familiar with the tools. And then you get them to present on their findings. And when you ask them to present, I always find after they've presented, because they're meant to do the group's presentation, you always ask that group whether they're happy with that presentation. Because sometimes I've had it the person that said, "Bug at the group, I'm going to give my own views." But the role of the presenter is to give the group's views, not their own. So you always check back with the group, are they happy with that presentation, just to check that person hasn't gone off and that right answer. Okay. Any comments on that one? That's an organisation in Fiji used it to develop key result areas for what they crave for, and then that was written in their performance criteria for their bonus and reward system. So it's been used in Fiji. But it's a good one. It's a very simple one. And it's amazing what comes out. Anybody would like to make any comments on it? So people going like that, your head won't fall off or like that. Okay. You go. Must be the hour of the evening or something. Okay. Just want to talk a bit about value statement, because values obviously are pretty important for your culture. They're meant to be reflecting of what it's all about. So there's some questions that I find useful to help people understand what develop a value statement. Some more questions around that value statement and so on. If you answer those, that help you understand. You can even answer as they are now, and then what would they be if the situation was perfect or ideal. There's a lot of comparison of what it is now to how you need to change it. This is a series of value cards that I've used, and this actually was used to link into FEA's energising our people, our nation came out of this. They then changed once the people were energised, just to energising our nation. LTAs was to steer safely, I think, steer Fiji safely. That was based on using these value cards. Also TFL, the world at your fingertips. That was based on going through this value exercise. So there's 136 cards which are values, and you place each card under one of those 5 headings, from mostly practice through to rarely or never practice. So you have these values and you place them, and people do them in groups to discuss where they put the values. And normally I have the values of the organisation in my back pocket, and I go around and check where they've put them and so forth. And then you look at, if the situation was better, which values have you moved left, which ones have you moved right. Now quite often the argument then, whether things should be 3 and 4, put it in both as an argument. Don't get bogged down on those type of issues, but just using this process to identify what values you're weak on, you need to improve, or what values you're doing well and you want to keep going. And that forms then the basis for your value statement. Also then leads into, you can develop that into a vision or mission, or vision statement, etc. And they are very powerful when you get them right, because people sort of, it unifies the group. I mean, like FEAs, energise our people, because that stage the people weren't that energised, they're pretty demoralised. Energise our nation. Brief, no numbers, but very powerful. LTA, steer Fiji safely. TFLs, the fingertip, or we think it's at the world. Yeah, and I'm sure Total and other places, but separate ones. But so it's a good exercise. Also, it was the one that identified when I was doing that work with Queensland Education. The different stakeholders had the values in different areas, and then they realised why they all thought differently and so on. So their discussions came a bit different though. They realised if I accepted their placement of values, I would think the same way they do. And so it stopped a lot of silly discussion and got people to the real issues. Again, snorkeling versus the scuba diving. So that's quite a useful one. Network mapping. This is one for working out how you understand the informal structure of an organisation. And if you're in change management, that informal structure is really important to know, because that's how things happen. You know who to ring in your organisation. He or she might have the big title, but they are the important people. Remember I was mentioning before about knowing the PAs. And quite often, it's sort of very, very different. They tell me in TFL many years ago, it used to be the cleaners who were the real pivotal people here. The head cleaner had direct access to the managing director, and so on. So that's an interesting sort of situation. So don't underestimate where people are. So it's getting to understand how that works. So the objective is to understand that relationship between you and the people, both internally and externally, the informal structure, and then you look at it as it is, and then what would you have to change to make things better. Now here's an example of what you do. You put yourself in the middle. I'll go put BS there, or just Bill there, and then inside the organisation, I look at all the people I deal with. If they're above me in the structure, I put them there, same level there, or below there. Outside the structure, and you can break them into subgroups, and so you end up with like a wagon wheel, lines going to different people. The thicker the line, the more frequent the contact. Like I had one organisation said, we are customer focused. They did a wagon wheel, but all their focus was internally, not externally. So they got the message very quickly, but really they weren't. They said they're customer focused. Another guy was having problems with his staff, he couldn't handle it, so he's talking to all the other people. If you're a very siloed organisation, you have a busy wagon wheel, because you're all the time trying to understand what's going on in other silos. A private secretary or PA or PE, they have a busy wagon wheel for their contact with different people. So what you tend to do is put these all up on the wall and go around. Another organisation I was working for, they said IT was the biggest problem in the organisation. The 14 managers did the wagon wheel, and not one of them had the IT person on it. So demonstrate why it was a problem, because no one was communicating with it. So then you look at it and say, okay, how can I make my situation better? And so on. So again, we don't really have time to go on it, but that's a tool used. And actually one of my associates used this when he had to change the government to work out who were the important people he needed to know in the new government. And so forth. Had the Prime Minister in the middle and who he dealt with, etc., and then worked out who were the important people influenced by that. So he uses all sorts of situations and so on. And it's another guy in project management used it and realised why he's having some problems because he wasn't spending enough time on it. And you can add to it by if the relationships are good, you can put pluses and minuses, you can put lines where the power flows and so on. So org structures don't mean much to me. They don't tell me how the organisation functions. This informal way does. And then you can look at it and say, well, maybe we should have an organisation like that, that how it functions properly. And if you're down to do an organisation review, you've got to do something like this first. And you can get computer programs that will do this for you. They end up looking like things that a meal of spaghetti, but it's sort of, you can see all the links. So, I mean, there are computer programs that help you. I'm a bit old-fashioned. I like the ones done with flip charts and hang them on the wall and people walk around and make comments, etc. So yeah, the drawn line show the frequency of dealing and then the quality of communications. You can add from 1 to 3 there, and friendship links as well. Add to seconds. You can use it for a variety of measures. In change, you need to know what your key stakeholders, who they are and what their needs, interests are, what are their drivers, how do you engage them, how can you get best support from them, how can you best manage them. Simple questions, but very powerful. And remember I said before, everyone always assumes all stakeholders in an organisation have the same values and so on. They don't. I was talking to a guy in immigration the other day and he's only just recently gone there and he said he's amazed at the number of subcultures in that department, etc. So you can use these to understand also the subcultures of an organisation. I bet you that, you know, if you've got branches or workers in Nandi and Suva, you'd have, to me, much likely two different cultures. Okay, it's important creative thinking in change. Creativity means doing something differently. That's the same definition of change, and that's why they're linked. They're really twins. You need to be creative. And you've heard people say, think outside the box. And chance is a good way. Mistake, the actual Louis Pasteur found out by mistake how to handle rabies. He was going on holidays, he had left a culture out and told his technician to put it in the fridge. The technician forgot to, so when he came back they injected that culture into the dog. The dog shivered a bit and recovered, and they expected it to die because it was a weakened strain. And then so they injected the full dose and the dog just shivered a bit and survived. So that resulted in the idea of vaccination working. The same thing with the control of the larvae of malaria. The fellow had a petri dish with some larvae in it. He went out for a break. The cleaner came in by accident, spilled a drop of detergent on top. So when the fellow came back from his break, all the larvae had died. So then they realised that they stop the oxygen getting into the water, the larvae would die. So mistake in how you see it. Humour is an important one because the humour tricks the brain to think different. It's the punchline that makes you jump out. Provocation, we don't have time to look at some of the tools that people like Edward de Bono have developed to help you think differently. One example I've just used in P&G was that we said, and this is a provocation, so it's something that's a bit left field. We said all managers must chew betel nuts in P&G. And because everyone's a bit shocked, you know, because it's frowned upon in some circles. But by thinking about that, I think we ended up with a scenario where we said, imagine if you could go and see a plant breeder who could take the redness out of the betel nut and make it so you can swallow, would take the calcigenic substance out of it and make it a pleasant tasting thing because it's a bit of a stimulant and also it's an appetite suppressant. So all of a sudden it would be like having a cup of coffee. You can still have the betel nut, chew it, but you're not going to have a red mark on your teeth. You're not going to have the stain, and you're not going to have the increased chance of getting the cancer of your jaw, etc. So that was, from what seemed like a silly statement and exaggeration, worked. The same thing they used it to start the Olympic Games. The first Olympic Games in modern times was profitable as LA. Before that, they were not profitable. Montreal was still paying off. Moscow was next. They had a different accounting system in those days. And then LA, and the guys that I used, some of the bonus and lateral thinking techniques. Because before, they were very worried about televising the event. They thought that would compete against tickets. And they were relying on ticket sales to make money, and they weren't making money through ticket sales. So this guy twisted that around and said the audience, or the people in the sitting on the seats, are the audience for the television cameras. And they went out and made sure that the TV people paid top dollar. So that's now when there's a game being televised and they don't have a big crowd, they'll give away free or cheap tickets, and they'll put people in certain areas, and that's what the cameras will zoom in on. You or I think it's great, you've got a cheap ticket at the footy or something, but really the reason is it's being televised. When they want to zoom in the crowd, they don't want to show empty seats, they want to show those stadiums blocked. So these ideas do work. I've used them in my own business successfully, etc. So now that's people familiar with mind maps. This is the way the actual brain works, bravely in and out. This looks like a neuron actually, and this is Bono's 6 hats explained as a mind map. And this is if you get in and get a chance to develop using mind maps, you'll find it's powerful. I summarise things in mind maps now, and I can go back to a mind map from 6 months ago and look at it and in about 20 seconds get the gist of a 20 page report, which I've summarised as a mind map. Now this is the 6 hats of thinking. The white hat's the information, the yellow hat's the positive things, the green hat's the creative thinking, the new ideas, the red hat's the emotional, the blue hat's the overview, and the black hat's the critical approach. If you use that way of thinking and that way of looking at problems and running meetings using the 6 hats, you'll reduce your meeting times by 25% and also can get much better consensus. Because how often do you go to a meeting and you know there's a person who's against the idea and he or she will be negative the whole night. You're not allowed to be negative the whole night. You're allowed to be negative when you had the black hat happen. So basically you use that hat, everyone has to think that way. So again, it's written up in more detail, but you can get this on the internet. I can't speak highly enough of this. After a while, you don't use the hats. You just stand up and say, do we have enough information? What are the good points of this? What can go wrong? What's your feeling about this? Are there other ways of doing it? And then the overview brings it all together. So creativity and change are really twin brothers. Okay? I'm willing to put 500 Fiji or even Australian dollars on the table, and I'll demonstrate you waste half your time at work. I've never got a taker on it, but I've done this when I was a senior manager myself, and I wrote it up in a management journal using some definitions of work. If you're in the corporate world, you only should be doing things that your client will pay for, otherwise why are you doing it? Okay, there might be some legal requirements. There's too much rework, checking things. You go to meetings you don't need to go to, you can delegate. How do you speed up meetings? Well, you firstly you turn off the mobile phones, because that gets people pretty upset. They don't want to stay too long with the phone so long. You never have a meeting at 9 in the morning, you always have half an hour before end of day. You heard it first thing in the morning, it will drag on as long as people have it at the end of the day, they'll get to it pretty quick. If you want to speed it up more, you make people stand. After a while, they get a bit agitated. Now, if you're in the public sector, obviously you don't have that criteria of what am I working on, would somebody pay for it? But you can look at, is this adding value, what you're doing? So I get people to pull their diaries out last 2 weeks, show them definitions of work, 5 definitions there, and most of them the higher up you go, the more time you waste on unnecessary things. You go to meetings you don't need to go to, you can delegate. After a while as a manager, you've got to learn that if a person brings a problem to you, you've got to say to them, I will not discuss that problem unless you bring solutions. Otherwise they're putting the monkey on your back. So I've even had managers who have a sign on their door, don't come just with your problems, come with your solutions. agree to see people who want to see their problem solutions at 4 o'clock every Friday afternoon. That's when you get the Unless it's an emergency. Because usually, if it happens on Monday, they will solve it by Friday themselves. If it's really serious, you'll learn about it. But too often they'll run into your desk and put that monkey on your back and make it your problem. As you go up the tree, you want to make sure that you're not the idiot who's got the monkey on the back. So don't come in here unless you've got problems. And by the way, it's Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock when I'm available to discuss the problems and the solutions. There's some, you choose how you want to handle it. And as I said, the same with report writing. We do, especially people in the public sector, heaps of report writing. But you'll be amazed how often the reports aren't read. Or you do, as some people do, after about page 16, they're writing silly comments in the report. I reckon most people don't read reports after page 16. I know one country in the world where a subcontractor said, I really want to write a report that's critical of this country. The main contractor said, please don't do that, we won't get any work. They came to a compromise. After page 16, he wrote what he liked, and he did. And that country still hands that report out as a good report. Okay. Now, they looked at 30 high-profile and successful firms over 100 years old. So this doesn't include Google, Microsoft. It doesn't even include GE. GE, when the survey was done, wasn't 100 years old. And they found that 6 key things, of which one was a willingness to change. But also a consistent set of values. But there were 6 key factors, and a willingness to change was one of them. Okay, a bit on change management now. Change is doing something different or differently. Very similar to creativity. That's why if you're into change, you've really got to understand what creativity is about. Change is a human journey, dealing with people. It's not about change control. Project management got it wrong. They talk about change control. That's why they're now talking to change managers to say, please help us on the soft side. It's more about stewardship. Facilitation is very important. Howard Gardner was the fellow who got multiple intelligence going. So that's an interesting quote from him. This is one of the key ones I show to people. This is number of people in your organisation. This is the criteria of acceptance of change. You have a normal distribution curve of generally 3 things. Basically, you've got about 2.5% who are the